Nick jumped in the tailgate, I kid you not, at 5:52 a.m.
Go, Nick.
And brought up something that we had thought about discussing here on the show. Nick says, what do you guys think of the way Malachi Moore was acting towards the end of the Vandy game? Is that something of concern locker room wise? Love the show, by the way. Now, for those who do not understand the context, I'm guessing he's referencing kicking the ball, right?
Do we have the video? Yeah, like he goes and kicks the ball away from the refs, and he's shouting at other players on his defense.
Clint Lamb from Next Round Live did like a 3-minute video on everything because it was a lot. It was even more than kicking the ball. They tried to sub in for him, and he went to Kane Momack and was like, no, and like turned his back. I mean, it's a lengthy ordeal which took place. Like, it's bad. Like, if you haven't seen that video that he did, it's really good. It's really well done. It's not because I know there's a lot of skies falling, like Kalen DeBoer was a mistake takes that are out right now, which are absolutely ridiculous. This one was more like, I do think this is significant. Our own Damian Harris. I don't know if you saw what Damian said. Damian was on his podcast, which he does with The Athletic. And he was like, this is some BS. He's like, if he was in, I mean, it's funny how you can get old manish and you're not that old.
Yeah,
he's pretty old man.
I love working with him because he has an old school mindset. Like, he very much puts team before me, and I think that's what a lot of Bama players did. He said if that happened in our locker room, we would have torn off the C on his chest. Yeah. Like, so when you hear a former Bama player calling that out, I thought it was too long. Like, I thought you got to contain that emotion past. I get a hit in the moment that does look incredibly dirty. I get that under happening. I may understand, chucking a mouthpiece, but there's no way that happens under Saban. You're too terrified of the consequences. And that to me is, I think, something that could be an issue with a new staff who is, they've taken the approach of, we're going to do what we've always done. And it's been very player friendly, media friendly, and it's awesome. And the players have loved it. The players will walk all over you really fast. And I think that's potentially what you could see happening.
That's not the biggest, there are many more questions to answer. All right. So we've got a little bit of it. Mikey pulling it on the go. We appreciate this. Let's see if we can pull it up on the screen for those watching along on youtube.com/cover3. So this is
that's the hit, the dirty hit, which is clearly dirty. That's frustration.
There's somebody on the grassy knoll.
Then he kicks the ball.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
here he throws his mouthpiece like across the field, which again, I'm not that upset. And he's yelling at the coaches and the staff, like he's yelling at everybody. This is where the last part of it, I think, is where it gets most egregious. When they try to sub in for him, because that's what you would do if you see a player in trouble, like he's lost it and he's blacked out. Like, it happens. You black out and you lose your bleep. Yeah, you're seeing red. Coaches are like, get off the field. And he says no. And they have a sub run out and he turns him back and says, I'm not coming out. That to me was where it became more problematic.
I mean, it's just passion. That's all I see. Kai wants to win.
I was going to say
it is.
Yeah. Like, a little bit. Like, he clearly cares. And this loss bothers him. I think it's worse when a guy doesn't care, like certain teams laughing on the sidelines when they're losing by 60 or over the weekend. Like, that's probably just okay. Like, they're totally checked out. Like, Malachi Moore is not checked out, but I think he's probably pretty frustrated with his secondary, which, like, Danny, I know you had notes on this. Saban got some stuff wrong in the preseason. Like, he said FSU's defensive line looks like the best in the country, blah, blah, blah. But the one thing he did get right, it looks like now in hindsight, was his concern for this Alabama secondary. And you think back, like, how many good quarters has Alabama's back seven, and specifically the secondary, which is brand new? I mean, they're super young, multiple true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, new transfers coming in. Like, this was Saban's concern, and it has shown in almost every game, whether or not the opponent actually took advantage of it. Like, you go back and think about this. Let's review this season in hindsight. Now, think about what these opponents have done to everyone else, okay? Western Kentucky was pretty clearly playing the wrong quarterback against Alabama. It's not until Finley got hurt that they put in Veltkamp, and then they cooked Toledo. Right? It's like, oh, wait a second. Oh, we're playing the wrong kid. So you effectively faced who should be Western Kentucky's backup, and they had guys wide open. And we pointed out on the broadcast, they had guys running wide open at secondary, and Finley, the Western Kentucky quarterback, just didn't see it. The next week, USF, same deal. They had guys running wide open. Brown, the USF quarterback, he actually saw it, just couldn't hit it. The next week you face Wisconsin. You don't get a real test there because you knock out Wisconsin's starting quarterback in like the first 10 minutes of the ball game. So all of a sudden it's all hands on deck with the backup QB for the Badgers, a team that I think most of us faded this preseason pretty hard anyway. And then against Georgia, you played some pretty interesting stuff. You were clearly saving up. It worked for like maybe 20 minutes. Georgia has a receiver run the wrong way on a screen, so you end up getting a pick six the other way, or maybe not pick six, but like an obvious score. And so you have a positive game state to defend Georgia the rest of the game. You're up, 28-0? And Georgia storms all the way back. It's not like the run game did it, right? Like they just dropped back and threw it all over you. I think it's pretty fair to argue that Bama secondary has like one good quarter of play this year. And then against Vandy, like the rotations were all jacked up. Like Vandy had it. They schemed him up and carved him every quarter. It's like maybe Bama secondary just sucks. So far, that's really the only I can conclude.
It'll probably improve this Saturday, though. I bet you they play four
This
great quarters against South Carolina. It has been a problem for them all year. Like it hasn't shown in the results, but you're right. Like there have been concerning signs in their secondary all year. They haven't really had to pay the price for it. They paid the price a little bit for it. Like it's not like Vandy was killing them through the air. Vandy was mostly just kind of controlling the clock on the ground, and Diego Pavia was taking stuff that was there. But it is more than anything, to me, we can talk about the secondary, and it is a problem. But the other problem was they were getting blown off the ball by Vanderbilt. Like it's just there's a lot of problems on that side of the ball right now. And then you go to the Malachi Moore thing at the end, and I get like I said, I was kind of joking, just passion. I get why it's a problem, but I also don't completely hate it because if I'm Alabama and I'm losing to Vanderbilt, I kind of hope somebody on my team's pretty pissed off about it, just to be honest with you. So I'm not really going to hold that against Malachi Moore, and I'm not going to do like the sky is falling. Kalen DeBoer has lost control of this program. It wouldn't happen under Nick Saban, blah, blah, blah. I know that's what Alabama fans are doing. But it could just be Vandy's better than you thought. And it's not like Alabama hasn't lost games before. I still think going forward the rest of this season, I don't know if I'm going to call them the top 2 team in the SEC. They might be top 3, maybe top 4, but they're still near the top of that league. And I still think they're going to win most of the games left on their schedule.
All right. So let's play a little game. Is Alabama LSU? There has been a sort of like generalized, discussion that we've had about LSU where it's like, oh, their offense is incredible. They can go and they can hang 40 points on about anybody, but they can't get any stops. And that is ultimately their weakness. Like, has Alabama drifted down to that kind of personality trait?
The front 7 is better. I'm pretty sure I think Bama's linebackers are way better than what LSU has.
Deontay Lawson, I still think he's a very, very good player. I am impressed with him often.
Yeah.
Bama's defense is mid. Steal word from Tom Fornelli. That's the take I had. Just in watching kind of
so natural saying that, let me tell you.
Yes, exactly. Well, I was trying to think it doesn't really flow. There was a mid zoo which flows. And I was trying to think, is it
Alabama Crimson mid?
Yes, it doesn't really work. But I went through and started looking at defenses that I think that are better than Bama's. And I had 6 for sure, and then a grouping of teams where I'm like, I think this is probably there in their ballpark. And the teams that I had in the ballpark were Arkansas, Auburn, and maybe South Carolina.
Oh, you mean within the SEC?
Yeah, just in the SEC.
I think South Carolina's defense is better than Alabama's.
Like I had them ahead, but I was like, are we sure? They did just get worked by Ole Miss, but their offense struggled. They were on the field a long time, but I had them as better. I had Tennessee, Texas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Kentucky, Oklahoma, all better than Alabama's defense.
I would agree.
I'm still not convinced of the Ole Miss defense. I mean, we could play the same game we just did with Alabama. It's like, let's go through who Ole Miss has played: Furman, Middle Tennessee, Wake, Georgia Southern, Kentucky, and South Carolina. Like, we'll get a much better idea of how good this Ole Miss defense actually is against LSU this weekend. But I think to your overall point, yeah, I think that Alabama's a top half of the SEC defense, which is a pretty damning statement compared to where Alabama typically is.
And we're coming out, and that's, we're coming out of the Georgia game talking about them competing for the SEC championship, and not necessarily as a prediction.
The offense is still really good.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, like, they might have the second best offensive line in the conference.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Georgia didn't get a lot of pressure on those guys.
It's just so different that here we are talking about Bama like this. And I do think your team takes on the personality of your head coach. I think that's natural when you have an offensive-minded head coach and you've had a defensive-minded, maybe one of the best ever. I think there's going to be some characteristics that change. I think it's just shocking the way we're talking about it and why maybe they don't dominate as much as they did, and why we're sitting here talking about, Tom, the stat you gave about the amount of points, the most amount of points scored against Nick Saban against Vanderbilt was 13, and they had 13 in the first quarter. I mean, that was unbelievable. By the way, I miss you guys on Saturday nights, kind of. Like when I hit the sleepy time tea and I'm like, oh, yeah, I've been working a long day. I actually really did miss the show because I was bummed you guys got to catch up with Bart, and that was awesome. That was really cool. Man.
Yeah, he came through. And the dentist making his on-screen debut.
I just listened. I need to go back and watch video.
Oh, it's the shades are they're even more fitting of him than you saying mid.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I thought like the dentist looked like he just got off the slopes.
Yeah. Also, like he'd come out of it did look a little bit like he'd come out of the Champagne locker room, like he'd had the goggles on or something. I mean, it was
just wrapped up the NL West championship.
Yeah. Dennis was you could tell that there were some adult Vanderbilt alums and Nashville people of a certain stature that had just taken it deep.
The Commodores.
Yeah. Yeah, some kind of interesting. All right. Okay, so one last to sort of put a button on the Alabama defense thing. Do you think that, obviously statistically we expect that they will perform better against South Carolina? Is this a fixable issue for the Alabama defense, or is this just what they're going to be?
I think it's fixable. I mean, there's no rule that says true freshmen can't get better as they get more acclimated to the scheme. Right?
I mean, I think timing is going to matter because I do think South Carolina this week, they should be. It's not going to be a problem. I think you can improve for sure. Fixable. I mean, I guess that means, what do you mean by fixable? Do you mean it's going to be great by the end of the year, or is it just going to improve?
Let's again call into old SEC stuff off the top of my head. There was a narrative that LSU quote unquote fixed its defense in 2019. Remember that it's like they started, making enough winning plays. They started playing a little bit better in the biggest games. I remember in the SEC championship game that year, they put the clamps on Georgia. Not a Georgia explosive offense, but certainly played well enough to win that game and dominate doing so. So,
I think it'll be matchup dependent. Like I think they can improve, but I do think like when they play Tennessee and they play LSU and maybe even Missouri, depending on how they look in that game, because those are 3 games in a row where you're facing much better receivers than you faced against Vandy, and you'll be facing this weekend against South Carolina.